this is Stalky for another deck tech. Today we'll be talking about Midrange Swordcraft. Midrange Swordcraft was the agreed upon best deck in the format before the release of the mini expansion, but as it didn't get anything new with the mini expansion, people sort of forgot about it. While people are now attracted to the shiny new decks like Vengeance Blood and PDK Dragon, Swordcraft is still very strong. In the wise words of Dr. Dre, forgot about Swordcraft. Swordcraft as a deck doesn't really do anything fancy. It just does everything well. It has very strong options at every single point in the curve, and as we will see in the strategy part, it just wins games by virtue of playing better cards. Swordcraft is a very good deck both for ladder and tournament, but its downside is that it is very expensive, maybe the most expensive deck in Shadowverse at the moment. The good news is, it will likely survive rotation because only role players are rotating. Gawain, Luminous Mage and Support Cannon. Even though those cards are good, we've already seen pretty good replacement in the first pillars of Brigade of the Sky, so you can invest safely, until Sky Fortress gets nerfed. Let's start by taking a look at the deck list. Like most Shadowverse's deck, this deck has about 5 to 6 flex slots. Support Cannon and Barbarossa have been adapted lately, but weren't always a part of the archetype, and people sometimes play Frontline Cavalier, which I will show later, as a foil to aggro decks. What's most important in this deck is that the 12 slots for the 2-drops are pretty fixed, as you need them for Arthur, and personally I tried playing only 2 Holy Bear Knights, because I wanted more chances to hit Celia with Arthur when I had Support Cannon out, but the problem is you will draw your 2-drops naturally, and for your Arthur to be good and your late game Arthur, your second Arthur, to still be strong, you need the full set of 2-drops. So with all the 2-drops and Arthur, that's already 15 slots taken in the deck list, and that will never change in the next rotation. And then, even though the other cards are kind of interchangeable, we will be taking a look at them in the next section. Also, Support Cannon was sort of seen as a meme card until it was good enough. And recently, especially with Dawnbreak Night Edge bringing very good commanders, Support Cannon is really seen as an integral part of the deck and should likely not be cut until rotation. Key cards are what makes the deck tick together. Arthur is the centerpiece of Midrange Swordcraft. By itself, it floods the board with 2-drops and will usually bring you 10 power and 14 toughness for 6 or 7 mana, depending if you got a Gawain or not. Let's make this clear. This card is ridiculous. This card has warped the entire meta around it, with every single tier 1 deck having to be able to answer an Arthur board. If you cannot answer an Arthur board or cannot kill your opponent before they play Arthur, you are likely not a tier 1 deck, because it is just so strong and so meta-defining. The second key card is Sky Fortress. Even though it doesn't look that broken, it's a card that allows Swordcraft to go to the next level. Arthur was already here in Chronogenesis, and Mid-Swordcraft was nowhere near tier 1. Sky Fortress is what actually carries the deck, making its turn 8 really scary. By itself, it usually brings 8 power and 9 toughness with Rush or Storm to the board, which the opponent will usually not have any answer to, as he will have had to handle your previous plays. But Sky Fortress isn't only a finisher, and that's why it's in the key cards. It's really what helps you pull ahead after the evolution turns. But the deck isn't only made of those 2 cards. It needs the right support to win, so let's take a look at it. First, we have the 12 2-drops. What's important to note is that 3 of them have Enhance, and therefore gives you a lot of staying power in the mid game. Even though you will almost always have a 2-drop, it doesn't mean you will be flooding on 2-drop when the game goes long, because they will transform into 5 and 6 drops. This is the kind of strength that very few decks have, and that really makes Swordcraft shine. Celia in particular acts as a 2-drop, a board developing 5-drop, and a finisher by turn 10, and she was very close to make it into the key cards. The next segment is the board control tools. As we will see in the strategy section, Swordcraft thrives on being ahead on board and presenting a board your opponents cannot deal with. To do that, you need to be able to clear your opponent's board efficiently. This is where all those rush creatures come in, and Support Cannon even accentuates that, while also sometimes playing the role of a finisher. And even though I already told you all the cards were good, the last part is made up of cards that are there just because they're good. It's just good stuff. They don't do anything special, they're just good. Chromatic Jewel in particular sometimes plays a role of a board control tool, thanks to the White Queen, but it's also sometimes a protection spell from the Black Queen. It's very adaptable depending on your hand, depending on the matchup, and it's just a great card overall. Frontline Cavalier also appears here, even though she wasn't in the deck list. She's definitely one of the flex slots in Swordcraft at the moment, and she's really great against more aggressive builds of Forestcraft, as the 1-2 can easily trade with fairies, and the life gain is much needed. Let's move on to analyzing the strategy of the deck. Mid's Swordcraft goal is to create a board position that your opponent can't answer, and to capitalize on it by killing them very fast once they've run out of answers. This kinda sounds like the goal of every deck in Shadowverse, but Swordcraft in particular is great at it. More specifically, you want to be forcing your opponent to answer your plays, and while they are doing it, you will try to take over the game with whatever survives. For example, a lot of the cards in your deck give you a continued advantage if they survive, be it Morse, Gawain, a Luminous Mage, Support Cannon, Sky Fortress buffed Commander, or even just Bladed Hedgehog. All those cards require immediate answer or they will take over the game. The multiple enhanced cards in the deck also help with that, because your threats will be scaling in the mid-game and will become harder and harder to answer. So what beats Swordcraft? Well, decks that can repeatedly clear the board shine against Swordcraft. This is the Portalcraft and the Dragoncrafts of the world. If you can only clear one author, a second will come. In the end, Swordcraft is a pretty balanced strategy that has game against most of what people will bring against you, but it still suffers from having very specific counters, like Portalcraft. Then, let's conclude with some gameplay considerations. We'll start with the mulligans. I'm saying that a lot, but you have to mulligan to a curve. The true drops you want will depend on the matchup, with for example Koholin being bad against Forestcraft and Havencraft, but you really want to be playing a 2-drop into a 3-drop. Morse in particular is pretty OP when you're going first. And even though Author and Sky Fortress are key cards of the archetype, you should almost always be mulliganing them away. Regarding the in-game decision making, as I said earlier, you should try to put your opponents off balance. You want them to be forced to react to what you're doing, and you have to do everything so they lose their footing while doing that. When deciding between multiple options, you should usually go with the one that leaves you with the most creatures on the board. You really want to be going wide, and sometimes you should be doing it at the expense of more value. The difference between having a creature or not having anything on the board when you can play Sky Fortress is ridiculously huge. So you always want to go as wide as possible. Another pretty important skill to learn is when to use the Black Queen. She is a key card in your difficult matchups, and you have to play it when it will be the most disruptive for your opponent, which means before Frenzied Drake against Dragoncraft, before Cassiopeia from Forestcraft, or before Magna Legacy from Portalcraft. Other than that, really, just focus on being a pain to your opponent and on creating a scenario where you can slam a threat that they won't be able to answer. So this is it for this Midrange Swordcraft video. I've already been able to make some improvements to the deck text thanks to you guys' feedback, so don't hesitate to ask for more. I'll be doing my best to provide you with the best deck text on the market. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow for the 3rd edition of Meta Monday, so have a good day and pick a top tier.